Welcome to the 37th episode of the interview series. The interview series is a production of 1 Week Critique, an Iowa-based arts and education nonprofit that offers educational resources and editorial support to students and teachers of the literary arts. You can learn more about us and our programs or support our work by visiting our Patreon page or going to our website, oneweekcritique.com. That's the number 1weekcritique.com. I'm Matthew Schmidt, joined today by Giorgia Pavlidou. Giorgia Pavlidou is an American writer and painter, splitting time between Greece and the US. The author of Inside the Black Hornet's Mind Tunnel, she's the main English language editor of Sulphur Literary Magazine. Before devoting herself full-time to painting and writing, she worked as a clinical psychotherapist for about 10 years. Welcome, Giorgia.
Thank you. Thank you. Lovely to be here.
Great. Today, we're going to be looking at the Annunciation of the Phonemic Body from Inside the Black Hornet's Mind Tunnel, which was published in 2021 by Trainwreck Press.
Okay.
And actually, I believe you contributed the artwork to the front cover as well, right?
Yeah, that's my painting.
Excellent. So this poem was originally titled Sonic Pisces Swimming and Silicon Skin. Could you introduce us a little bit to your thought process in composing this poem?
Well, like most people who call themselves writers, I'm obsessed with language. But I observe in myself a peculiar compulsion relationship between language, the body, the physical body. And there's a concept I've coined, the languaged body. It's a neologism. And it's like, in my view, language flows in and through the cells and the nervous system of the body. And doing so, it also shapes the body. Like I've read reports of Native American children, for instance, raised by Euro-Americans, and they developed similar features and body structures as white people, which I find extremely interesting. How language perhaps can massage the physical body into a particular shape. And I could go further and reflect if it's a coincidence that various cultures have this cultural intuition that life, the world, and humanity were created by sound. Like we have in our Judeo-Christian civilization, we have this well-known biblical statement, the word is God. And in the Bhagavad Gita, meaning the song of God, it suggests that life has been brought forth by music, by Krishna's flute. Now, I'm not religious myself, but I find these ideas absolutely fascinating. On a more secular plane, there is the psychoanalytic notion that language is external to human beings, and that as kids, we're inserted into language, and in the process, we acquire an identity. Sometimes this complex process goes wrong, and Lacan, a French psychoanalyst that has influenced my thinking very much, he believed that language goes parasitic on psychotic people. And then, of course, we have William Burroughs, who was convinced that language is a virus. And for Will Alexander, somebody who's very important to me as a person, as a friend, and as a mentor, he feels that language is a living intelligence. Now, all these considerations, they're somehow woven into this poem, not really as truths, but as ideas. I can continue, Matthew, but I hope it's not too abstract or.
No, this is fascinating. I really, like thinking about the ideas that you're bringing forth here, and thinking about how they are evident within the poem. Like what you mentioned about language as being the song of God, for example,
Mm-hmm.
or how language literally has the ability to shape the body is
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
interesting. One thing that it makes me think of right away is, when the language actually is shaping the body, or like as far as like age goes, like it starts shaping the body when you're a baby, a newborn, but like does it continue to shape the body throughout your entire life?
That's an interesting question. I think probably it does because, well, because it's, if I'm just freewheeling, right? The good thing about being a poet is that you don't have to, operate like a scientist. So
Right.
I'm just speculating and freewheeling. But, every time I visit Holland, and I've got good friends in Holland, and I was raised in the Dutch language, but from Belgium, the Dutch language spoken in Belgium. And I, in spite of me speaking in Dutch to locals there, they always answer in English.
Hmm.
And I wonder, like, why. I'm fluent in Dutch, and I've asked a few people, like, why do you do that? I mean, you hear that I'm talking in Dutch, but you answer in English. And some people, they said, I don't know, there is something about your charisma, something about your body language. And then I think, oh, maybe because I've been spending so much time in the United States and my life has been unfolding in English for decades, maybe, somehow they pick up that another language is organizing my charisma. I don't know, it's very fluid, but maybe, yeah, maybe there is, or maybe other people who dwell in various language, they can attest to that um, even when I go to when I visit Greece, where I was born, and I speak some Greek, but they, even without not saying anything, they immediately see, like, oh, hey, are you from the United States? Or so they pick up something. Now, what it is, I don't know, but I do think that language keeps on shaping us. Although, I think we can also direct this process. I know certain people here in Los Angeles, they read newspapers from the quote unquote old country, or they keep on watching television shows, and, well, maybe they are less impacted by American English, and then there are other people who, they have a sort of uh, crooked storyline. Their personal history has, like, or it's mutated somehow. There's yeah. I
Yeah.
would like to, if that's okay with you, I would also, because you asked, like, um, how did Sonic Pisces evolve into the Annunciation? Unless you want to ask something first.
No, go ahead with that. That'd be great to hear.
Okay. So I've been working on and off and on this poem for like years, like 3 years, I think. And I began sketching the poem while I was exploring Will Alexander's The Sri Lankan Loxodrome and Exobiology as Goddess. And I think um, something of the electricity of Will's poetry spilled over into my typing fingers. And I first titled it Sonic Pisces Swimming in Silicon Skin, which I actually find a bit of a silly title now. But I was searching for metaphors to express my experiencing of words being kind of metaphysical creatures capable of, like what we've talked about, capable of interpenetrating the physical, the body. And I'm particularly fascinated, Matthew, um, by certain psychoanalytic case studies when people experience psychotic symptoms, sometimes it seems as if the body gets disentangled from language, and the patient is acutely confronted with the real of the body. You know, like in the beginning of the poem, it states a wrinkled sack of bowels and bones. You know, what is a body when it's disconnected from the words? You know, and pardon my language, perhaps it's a sort of shit machine. And as I was rewriting and molding this poem for 3 years, different voices in my head began sprouting quite organically, a chorus of sort, and the tone changed into one of revelation, almost as if the content of the poem kind of, you know, the alchemical annunciation of a new body, the one true body, is also manifested in the shape of the poem. And I've kind of felt that the poem, regardless of my intentions, somehow is announcing that a new body is emerging, in the body of the future, and like we see in sci-fi storytelling. And perhaps this is also influenced when once when I tried reading Judith Butler, you know Judith Butler, yeah. So you know, I say tried reading because I think she's extremely difficult to read. So, but I came across the idea that the physical body could in fact be synthetic. So, and that's also something that has influenced, I think, writing this this poem. I find this an extremely compelling idea, because the body is, for many people, the last vestige of what we think of as natural, and then, you know, to contemplate it or to consider that perhaps it's also artificial is so, it's like as if it's, you know, this idea terrorizes the neat distinction between real and unreal, natural and unnatural. And it also made me think of William Burroughs saying that you know, the physical body is a sort of, you know, is in process of becoming an artifact for future space travel. So all that is in the poem. And but to be very honest, I did not pre-calculate anything. So all these things they emerged while writing.
All right. Well, that is a lot to take in at one time, but I love it. I really do love it. I think all of the things that you've been reading and thinking about are very interesting, particularly in the fact that, you know, it seems that, you know, kind of the academy, so to speak, of poetry is very interested in the body, but it doesn't always feel like they're reading as deeply as you're reading, or thinking as deeply as you're thinking, but trying to, I don't know, just note what's happening to their own body. So I think this is both like an inward and an outward thinking that you're doing, which also changes, in my mind at least, you know, how the writing comes out, and how it's, you know, sits on the page, and then, you know, obviously over time, editing and so forth, things change. But I think that approach is really fascinating, particularly thinking about the body as maybe being synthetic. And, you know, I love sci-fi. You know, your painting on the front of the book, you know, is somewhat sci-fi, just based on my imagination of the sci-fi. And I find that, you know, a really compelling opening before I've even read anything besides the title.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much.
Do you, we've kind of touched on this a little bit, but did you come to writing or painting first? Maybe you don't remember,
Mm-hmm.
or and you were a psychotherapist for almost a decade. How do
Mm-hmm.
you think those influence your writing, if at
Mm-hmm.
all?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, and do you like how do you decide? You've got an idea of some sort. Is it a painting? Is it a poem? How do you kind of go about thinking about that?
Okay. Okay. I guess this is the second question, right?
It is the second question.
Yeah. Well, I love seeing poetry as linguistic painting, like sketching your stanzas. And also the shape of a poem is in some way perhaps painted. I'm thinking about Ezra Pound. He thought that it was a sculpture of sound. Perhaps I see it as a painting of sound. And I also love the idea that many post-World War II painters in the United States experimented with jazz style improvisation. So I think I both paint and write in a similar way. And interestingly, it's also here where the connection with psychoanalysis and so also, clinical psychotherapy or psychotherapy becomes tangible, because improvisation is very much like Freudian free association on the couch, or automatism, surrealist automatism. But perhaps bebop goes a step further. I'm not a specialist in it, but I think music, it had an extra dimension, something more visceral, perhaps, or visionary. I mean, in contrast to, or in contrast with free associating on the couch, it's more visceral. And Will Alexander once described music as telepathic language, moving in all directions at the same time. But okay, maybe I'm a little bit losing track here. But I think all these things influence both both my painting and my writing, and maybe indirectly, there are a lot of psychoanalytic ideas that I find extremely fascinating. Not so much in terms of are they efficient, or I mean in terms of we're now in a age where everything is evidence-based, and insurance companies are, they're covering 10 sessions, and then you need to be operational again and ready to be inserted into the job market. But more like, for instance, this idea that the unconscious is structured like a language. See, that I find that a fascinating idea, and I think by following this rhizomatic, to use a difficult word, this kind of language developing like roots by free associating, or maybe by speaking in tongues, or trance speaking, like a lot of women in surrealism did, or even gibberish, or you perhaps arrive organically in a sort of otherwhere, in an other world. And without, I always am a little bit worried that I sound wishy-washy, but maybe this is also the space that is accessed by shamans, or medicine women and men, or I don't consider myself in that tradition per se, but I believe that these are archetypes that drive psychotherapists. So and Matthew, perhaps that's again too much to take in, or
Oh, no, I love this. It might be too much for me to process, like as quickly as I want to process it,
uh-huh.
But no, it's not too much. I want to, make that clear. Like
Okay.
this, it really, it makes my brain fire off, and many different directions at once. And, thinking about the different things I know and don't know about, these specific ideas, topics, so forth, right? And, one thing, I guess, one thing it pushed me towards was the idea that like a language is basically an agreed upon system of communication, to a point where like, this letter equals this, these letters together equal this. And of course, sound is built out of those letters. And I'm wondering, the idea of a portmanteau, for example, or creating your own type of language within the boundaries of the agreed upon language, and how that can change what people think or how they understand something that's said. And we have like new words come up all the time, it seems, to describe things. And so you're always learning new words, just to like stay in the zeitgeist of whatever's happening. And, I do really like putting words together and thinking about how they sound or creating new words. I wondered if you had any thoughts just on that in general, on whether it's, just a portmanteau of one word put right next to another word to create a compound word, or creating new words, so to speak, that look like words we know, but might have a slightly different meaning.
How I see language and words is that they are polyvalent, and their meaning is not fixed. It's kind of unstable. And another idea that comes from psychoanalysis that I find very compelling is that words actually are physical. They have like an electromagnetic aspect to them. They're not as dense as the physical body, but there is something physical about them. And well, it's and then there is also another intriguing little department of linguistics in a university in Switzerland. They believe that language is a sort of symbiont. So these are the kind, and your question, to go back to your question, I'm kind of thinking like, people who develop quote unquote psychotic symptoms often start using neologisms. Like, why is that? And then what about the new words in our day-to-day language? How do they come up? It's an interesting process. I think there's a lot of it is mechanical, like the language kind of renews itself, and it happens. I mean, obviously, there are no task forces anywhere in the world thinking, okay, we should develop new words,
right.
but somehow it's happening. So I think it's a living being. It's a living creature, and it has its own intelligence. And maybe it's also much larger than just the grammar and how we think of it as communication. I don't know if you've seen this movie Arrival. I mean, it's based on a short story. It's so interesting that these aliens they actually came to teach. What's the protagonist again? It escapes me.
It's Emily Blunt, right?
Yeah. And they actually came down to teach her their language, but because they had grammatical categories for future events. So who knows? Maybe in this thing that we call language, maybe maybe there's also, yeah, I don't know. Maybe there's clairvoyance in it, or intuition, and maybe if we can liberate ourselves a little bit from our linear Western Occidental way of thinking, maybe there's a richness there that can, I mean, all that leads to the work of somebody like Will Alexander. He's like constantly looking for these other names through language. And well, I don't know if I.
Oh yeah, no. I mean, I wasn't looking for like a specific answer, or something like
Okay.
that. I just wanted to hear your general thoughts on that. And yeah, I really like you bringing in Arrival, and just thinking about the sounds of that movie, and how they're teaching Emily Blunt. I forget her character's name as well, but how to understand their thought process and what means what.
And you don't have to go to another planet. Like I studied. I first, in college, I studied Sanskrit and Hindi, and later Urdu, and I spent almost 3 years in India studying Urdu literature, and Hindi and Urdu have similar grammar. And what is so, I think the most striking contrast between Hindi, Urdu, and a language like English or other Western European languages is that in Hindi and Urdu, what we consider as the subject, like, is often blocked. That's a grammatical thing. So, and that corresponds with the worldview there, that somehow there are objects that come to you, like, they don't say I feel good. They say things like goodness is attaching itself to me. See, that's a totally different, and spending time there, I had moments where I could feel like a sort of short circuit in my head, like, that I started feeling how, the Indian worldview communicated a sort of external reality. And I was like sort of, or humanity in general is more like a recipient rather than an active participant, like in our languages. So I think it's very interesting how different languages, they're almost like a story of reality.
Yeah. Well, let's look at the reality of your first draft here.
Okay.
I will pull up Sonic Pisces swimming in silicon skin.
Mm-hmm.
And whenever you're ready to read it, please go ahead.
Okay. Once upon a time, I was like you, a white protein bag, a wrinkled sack of bowels and bones, a machine manufacturing miniature machines every 9 months. I was wife, daughter, mother. But in my night dreams, I met naked cyborgs. Faceless females undulated like aboriginal snakes. I heard violent arrhythmic beats. I saw hurricanes of fire and large predatory birds circulating above my funeral pyre. In the midst of this dark chaos, the prima materia of human flesh and plastic, I saw my own corpse, breathing on an operating theater, surrounded by resurrected shamans or fire beings, acrylic jinns beating dysphonic drums. Medical robots were molding my skin, and I heard my organs whisper hybrid words, sounds of an aborted language, humming of an alien syntax. Feetless creatures wearing black leather clothes kneaded my flesh. Nanobots enhanced my cells. Holographic doctors respun my skin. Medical engineers reconfigured my nervous system. My eyelids cracked open when I felt words swimming in my skin. Pisces spoken, perhaps 3, perhaps 7 times, communicating unknowable speech, sharp sounds lingering in my cells. Think of me as acoustic Athena or Osiris, an aquatic shepherdess possessing ritual upholstery. Consider me a fusion between archaic spirit and artificial intelligence, herding sonic sea creatures. My being unfolds in a parallel ocean or unseen sea. I dwell in multiple dimensions at the same time, perhaps 3, perhaps 7. My flock, acoustic Pisces. Fish with decibel scales, sonic serpents squirming through rivers of asphalt. Despite my singularity, I don't exist as technocratic dogma or frightening steel Terminator's zombie golem. See me as oceanic apsara, guiding involutions of sound. Stroke my silicone nipples, kiss my plastic lips, admire my cosmic intelligence, be perplexed by my perpetual cognitive enhancement. Understand, once upon a time I was human, like you. I had parents and grandparents, brothers and sisters. I even birthed a baby boy. Now my skin is synthetic, my organs plastic, my mind electric, my womb linguistic. I give birth to prefixes and suffixes, verbs transitive or intransitive, and when I enter labor, triangles penetrate circles, circles stroke squares, the letter Y kisses the letter X. Water is seduced to disrupt, fig trees peel and devour their own fruit. But my births can never be reduced to merely 1 or 2. Like never be rendered singular or rational or functional. My sonic womb gestates pluralities, multipolar embryos gifted with perpetual regeneration and clairvoyant cognition, like rhizomatic specters in constant expansion. My placenta is molded from thousands of pink blizzards. My genitals are kneaded from a meltdown of female size, and my adjectives, they watch astral winds. Lingual hailstorms in black holes, they weave through dysphoric dream times as circular poltergeist or pornographic moon spiders knocking relentlessly against the human skull, asphyxiating its parasitic grammar, combating its omnivorous signifiers. My hybrid body belly dances on the oblique, and thousands of my lexical tentacles sneak through the corners of your hollow sockets. Understand that my dharma is kaleidoscopic, transfusing in all directions at the same time, piercing wormholes inside Occidental skin. I dig mind tunnels. And so my cognitive reconfigurations, my prayers are telepathic. Consider the zillions of microscopic infixes respinning postmodern fairy tales on your retina, undulating around your neurotransmitters, undulating around your phonemes. I ovulate in your skin. As three-eyed angels, I evaporate when you attempt to look straight into all my eyes. I am, at the very last, a phantom, fermented from indigenous sound waves. My tribal decibels sizzle in all your orifices, and when you orgasm, I leave you with no other choice than to speak to me. Utter any words, and you'll be spoken. Perhaps 3, perhaps 7 times. Whisper sweet words in my ear, and I'll promise that millions of splendiferous voices will sprout and flourish inside your head, singing songs from the future, songs sung without consonants, songs excommunicated from their native tongues.
Wow, thank you.
It's so interesting to read it out loud and interesting to read the old version.
Yeah, no, that's, I haven't done that a lot. It's my privilege to ask other people to do that, right? And it's always, it's always interesting to think about, you know, someone going back to an older version of a poem that has become kind of something else entirely, and reading it, because, you know, there's that original kernel and moment, and the time it takes to write a poem down. And then, you know, as you said, this took roughly 3 years from like initial
Yeah.
draft to published version.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so many things happen to you in 3 years. You know, it's just you live your life, you work on this poem, you work on other things, and you keep shaping the poem into something else that it's going to become.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, you know, I found that there were a lot of different interests in this poem, some of which we've kind of talked about, but, you know,
Mm-hmm.
there's linguistics, biology, myth, femininity, uh,
Mm-hmm.
AI, astrology, dream logic, and those were just some that I listed. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I was, I'm really interested to hear how you thought about going into this poem and revising it. Like, how do you focus it, or you know, decide what is the importance that you want to kind of move towards?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You know, I have to emphasize that nothing is pre-calculated. Everything is improvised. Everything is trans speaking. Of course, you know, while typing up and or writing, um, you know, of course, I encounter my own interests, which is, you know, things like transhumanism or um, cyborgs or, you know, body modification. All these things interest me. So, you know, I encounter my interests in my own writing. But, you know, to talk about revision, I gradually began experiencing this poem as a sort of mental wall painting, you know, a choreography of words. Um, and I think I tried to shape it as such. I can't say if it's successful. You know, it's, you know, it wouldn't surprise me if it will keep on evolving. And, you know, I feel a throb of sorts to keep on weaving and to perhaps sculpt a book, you know, a book long ecstatic monologue that builds further on this idea of a sort of prophet that is being announced um, by the equivalent of the Holy Spirit. And this prophet is, you know, a sort of cyborg. Um, and so that I think, you know, experiencing it as a choreography probably um, uh, influenced me a lot. And then something about the femininity, I think that struck me that you picked that up. I think that the feminine is something that is gravely misunderstood in our times. And, you know, in spite of um, the achievements of the civil rights movement and feminism, um, you know, I think the feminine principle is something that is very difficult to approach. And um, I'm thinking of somebody, a character like Hildegard from von Bingen, who thought of God as feminine or as the living light. So if there is femininity in the poem, it's probably, you know, it's nothing to do really with actual females. It's more like a sort of force, like yin, and maybe yin. Now that I'm, you know, these are ideas that are popping up in my head while I'm talking. I mean, as we speak, perhaps this yin is now bringing forth a silicon body.
I mean, I think there's plenty of material here that you could make a book long, you know, poem of, from this single draft. And
Mm-hmm.
obviously, we're going to look at the second draft here in a little bit, but I think that would be very cool. And you could weave in so many different things into that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I just want to say that I need to have the right conditions for that, because writing like this, seems to unleash like extremely intense energy, and it kills my sleep.
Yeah.
Like, so I think we're going to Greece next month. So and we have a little farmhouse in the Peloponnesian Highlands, very remote. That's a good location to,
Yeah.
So I think once in Greece, I'll start weaving again.
Yeah. Speaking of weaving, I was thinking about right, the idea of choreography, and a performance is different each time something's performed. And one of my questions for you was about using how you use punctuation or capital letters, and thinking about it choreographically, right? I'm kind of answering the question for you in a weird way. Like, it does allow a very strange, like, ability to move depending on how your body is feeling when you're reading it. Um, and so it's never the same, right?
Yes, absolutely. It's not, it isn't. Yeah. Yeah. I have to think of, not that I compare myself to somebody like Ralph Ellison, but when his house burned down, he could not reproduce the manuscript because it was all, improvised. But to go back to punctuation, I like seeing it as if I am abusing punctuation rules, like I'm misusing it, because I find commas and very distracting. And if I'm in a sort of writing trance and I need to think about punctuation, it kind of, I'm slipping out of my altered state of consciousness, so to speak. So I try to avoid punctuation and capital letters, and but sometimes I when I write and I realize that I have been using commas by accident, then I try to keep them because they sprung up organically. But there is and you mentioned like in academia that there is this that it's different, and that there is the theme of the body, etc. But it's, and what I want to say is that I think poetry can come from a variety of sources, and the source that is very well known is the man of letters, the learned man of letters, and I've nothing against that, but it's not like my tradition, it's not my source. So the way that I approach poetry is more like, it's closer to speaking in tongues, is to free association, and so that's my philosophy about punctuation. But I don't have anything against it if other people use it, but I try to avoid it.
Yeah, I think you mentioned you weren't sure whether or not the poem was successful, and that you're going to keep working on it, and possibly making it longer. And it's a strange thing, the poetry world as a business, wherein certain people decide, certain people get published, and this is the type of thing that we're going to teach and how we teach it and so forth. And I'm not saying one thing is better than another, but it is always a question as a creator. You're like, well, is this a good poem, or is this just I needed to kind of dump things from my mind, and like it felt good in the moment, but it doesn't have sort of some inherent worth, so to speak. And it's always one of those things as an artist, that you think about. You're like, well, I wrote this good thing, and then I've written all of this other scratches and whatever here and there, And I always come back to this one thing and I'm like, well, at least I did that one thing, and how we as humans kind of need some sort of validation that
Mhm.
we're doing something worthwhile, and how that, to weigh like whether going to school formally and getting an education versus not doing so, you can't weigh those two things. They're not on the same scale.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, that's an yeah, that's an important dilemma, I guess, when you when you are trying to find your way as a poet or as a writer. And I did my MFA in fiction. It was a torment. Um, yeah, it was a torment.
why
It's
was that?
well, because um, the rule in fiction, rules are so fixed. Maybe we should call it fiction, like with an X. And it's very difficult. I still, I'm completing a manuscript with short stories. So and I have two stranded novels. I tried imitating Roberto Bolaño because that's like more non-linear. But having a protagonist and an antagonist, or at least two lead characters having opposing goals, and then in the middle there is the point of no return, and all this. And I don't know if you know Lance Olson from University of Utah, professor English lit,
I don't think.
experimental.
No.
Yeah, he has written a few very interesting books. Like I think I read his Architecture of Possibilities, and it's so interesting that he reflects there how well most of novels are being written for, let's say, a male reader somewhere in the Midwest.
Like me.
And uh, so and then you can add like straight, blah blah blah. Not that I personally I don't like this. No, I shouldn't say that. Perhaps out loud. Whatever. Forget about it. I was wanting to say something about all these identities that are proliferating, but that's fine. Let's forget about that for a second. So it's more like and then I realized, well, I don't belong to that category of people. So my thinking is just not geared to, I could write something like Naked Lunch, or something like Katie Ackers is doing, but but then of course you want to go into the business. So, I had a lot of story ideas that I thought, oh, that's really trendy, and you know, and that could sell, like, when I started my MFA. But then I felt, there was no juice there. Everything became very dry, and in myself, and I almost stopped writing altogether. And it's basically my meetings with Bill Alexander, who that kind of kept the flame alive. And then I thought, hey, I'm going to just write whatever comes to me. And then I started also reading, more theory, like surreal concepts of surrealism, other experimental literature concepts, and I just kept on writing, and then I started meeting other people who people like Heller Levinson
Mhm.
and Anthony Zeitman, and um, started reading Lawrence Weisberg. I started studying more Philip Lamantia's work, and going deeper and deeper and studying, and then I felt more and more confident that, yeah, that's like what I want to do, whether it'll make me famous or not. I need to I have to say, like, reading about an artist like Leonora Carrington, who was truly focused on the alchemical qualities of the work. And I was in Mexico last summer, and this was such a prolific artist, and to do all that in obscurity, and then I thought I need to just continue doing the work, and regardless. And then Anthony Zeitman said, like, hey, why don't you send your manuscript to Trainwreck? And I did, and so I guess you have to look for what's vibrating in yourself. Yeah, and maybe poetry is not a business. I don't know. Maybe it's a vocation, similar to being a priest, or I don't know, or a priestess, or.
Yeah, it's interesting because when you start, like when I started writing poetry, it was just, I enjoyed it. I wasn't trying to do something per se. It was writing. And it's one of those things where I finish high school, I go to college because I'm supposed to go to college. I don't declare my major until my third year. I just try a bunch of stuff. And then I'm like, well, the one thing I really like is words. So English is going to be my major, because I like reading, I like writing, and I finish college, I get a job, right? I work a job for 5 years or more, and I hate it. I'm just like, this is not what I want to be doing with my life. I'm making plenty of money, but I don't want to do this. And so I just quit. But then I was, and so I was like, I'm going to focus on writing. The only problem, of course, is that you need to eat and, have a place to stay. And one way I could kind of get that is by going to grad programs that pay you a stipend. And so it's like at least my experience in that was kind of like I was put in a corner where, like, I refused to do something that, I didn't want to do, but that most people do. But then I had to somehow make it a profitable enterprise. And so it's interesting to think about, poetry as a business versus like the original reason I started writing poetry. They're completely different things, and yet the same thing kind of at the same time.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, I see what you're saying. That is a huge challenge. Yeah, I have to say I'm lucky that somehow my circumstances gave me the opportunity to not hold a job, and that's why I have this ability. And but there's not a voice that there are a lot of voices in my head often saying, hey, you could be making $150 an hour.
Yeah.
And you're like writing cryptic poetry nobody understands. But well, there are moments where we have to make these choices, and it doesn't make you more, it doesn't make me more sociable, or I don't socialize a lot because it's, hey, what do you do?
Yeah.
So you understand what I'm saying. Yeah. So, but I guess maybe who's that Japanese novelist again? Very famous. His name escapes me now. Norwegian. Yeah. In an interview I read that, he said that he deliberately wrote his first novel, I think it was Norwegian Wood, in a more kind of commercially, so that afterwards he can, I don't know if that's an option. Maybe that's an option. Like you play the game for a little while and then, you do your own thing. I don't know.
Yeah.
I talked with somebody like Will Alexander, who is obviously a veteran in these things, and he doesn't like the idea. He has never done it. He just remained true to what he, and I think now, I think it's it's he's growing, and there is a lot of attention and interest in what he's doing, and he has remained true to himself for decades. Nobody can ever accuse him of being a sellout.
Right.
But yeah, but I see what you're saying. Yeah.
But enough about me, right? Let's take a look at the revised version that was published in Inside the Black Hornet's Mind Tunnel here.
Okay.
All right, whenever you are ready.
Okay. The Annunciation of the Phonemic Body. Once below a time, I was like them protein bags, wrinkled sacks of bowels and bones, machines manufacturing miniature machines every 9 months. I was wife, daughter, mother, though in my night dreams, naked cyborgs sung to me, faceless females undulating as if gigantic transparent snakes. Violent arrhythmic beats flooded my eye shut. Fire crackled, crackled, crackled. And in the midst of this dark chaos, the prima materia of human flesh and plastic, my own corpse appeared ablaze on an operating theater. A young woman's body enclosed by throat-singing trolls chanting in polyphonic overtones, while medical robots rewrote my skin, while white coats respun my nervous system. My eyelids cracked open the morning after, when words trembled, wriggled, swam under my skin. Colossalic fishtails waved inside my womb. Pisces with decibel scales fluttered their invisible fins. Organs whispered, murmurs, murmurs, murmurs of an alien syntax, shrieking sounds as if resurrected from languages long gone extinct, annunciating that on the first day of the 6th month after March 25th, the day bodies of feminine thought burned up Osiris, serpents squirmed through rivers of asphalt and uttered et ecce concipius in utero. Ohne dich kann ich nicht leben. Once I was human. Parents and grandparents raised me. Brothers and sisters loved and hated me. I birthed a baby boy I detested and adored. Alas, on the 6th month, my new genitals chanted hallelujah in a meltdown of female sighs. My skin appeared synthetic, my organs plastic, my mind electric, my womb phonemic. Kiss my silicone nipples, kiss my plastic lips, be perplexed by my lexical fluidity. On the 9th month, when I entered labor, celestial triangles penetrated circles, circles stroked squares, the letter phi kissed the letter he. Water was seduced to disrupt, fig trees peeled and devoured their own fruit. My births can never be reduced to 1 or 2. Like my punctuation, this silicon body gestates pluralities, multipolar embryos gifted with perpetual regeneration, painted specters in constant phonemic expansion. And my adjectives, look, they're watching astral winds, lingual hailstorms and black holes, intergalactic phonemes, knock, knock, knock against the relentless human skull. My phonemic body was announced by the oblique. Its lexical tentacles burrowed in human skin. Observe zillions of swarming infixes spiraling up humanity's spine, undulating around one's neurotransmitters, undulating around one's phonemes. This phonemic body, this synthetic body, this one true body evaporates when one tries looking into all its eyes, like a spider's. 8, 8, 8. This plastic body with its multiple phantom genitals will rub against humanity's orifices. Billions will orgasm against their will. And when they do, they'll have no other choice than to speak to me in one contracted voice, whispering sweet words in my ears, perhaps 3 times, perhaps 7 times. And when they do, billions of splendiferous voices will sprout in their heads, singing songs from the future, songs of experience, sung without consonants, songs of innocence excommunicated eternally from their native tongues.
Excellent, thank you. So the final draft includes, by my count, at least 5 different languages, right? I've got Greek, English, Italian, Latin, and German. And, I was just thinking about how sound becomes embodied in poetry and in speech and in the human body. And we've talked about that a little bit. I wonder about, the choice to bring in the different languages, whether it was something that you said earlier, it's an organic process for you. So like when you're reading them over, how do you get to the different languages?
Okay. I think the languages are partially cut-up technique and partially speaking in tongues. I don't think I have a mother language. I was raised in the Dutch language, but my mother learned the Dutch language in school. She spoke Greek with her parents, my grandparents. And, I've been speaking mainly, English, and my life has been unfolding in English for decades. Exist in between languages in a sort of liminal lingual space. And I think, to paraphrase somebody like Jack Spicer, I think my vocabulary is making me do it. But there's also some deliberate use, like the Latin I've used to, symbolically to express a similar experience as Mother Mary's when the Holy Spirit announced that she's with the child of God. So, and that's also the literal meaning of the Latin in the poem. But here in this context, it announces the destiny of, a housewife, that she is the chosen one, the sacred cyborg, destined to be an alchemically enhanced female. So it's the voice that promises a ritual upholstering, a new cosmic skin. So that's the Latin. And then the Greek letters, they have like symbolic meaning. For instance, the theta symbolizes death in antiquity. And the phi actually is a psychoanalytic notion. It signifies castration, which it's always symbolic, it's not literally. And then the German is also a cut up from a 16th century German composer. And as this line kept on resounding in my head. And one day it's just weaseled itself into the poem. And it means, without you, I can't go on living. So I think in the poem, it refers to this process of metamorphosis, or that without death, there's no manure, so to speak, for life to sustain itself. So similarly, the metamorphosis induced by language, leading to the phonemic body, results in the body of the future. There's something halfway between organic and digital, the post-human body that, first the older body has to die so that the new body can be accepted or embraced. So that's, I think, how the other languages, and, my life kind of unfolds mainly in English, but it's as if there are certain satellite languages that constantly try to, my husband is Greek American, and but he he went to college and grad school in Paris in French. So, often we use French sentences or French words, and sometimes we use Greek sentences. And though mainly English speaking, a lot of other languages continuously cross-virtualize. And especially when you go on doing this free association or this automatic writing, then other words from other languages seem to want to get involved.
Right. Yeah, no, I think, all of the different shifts with the language are very, like, it gives this draft of the poem, the final version, a different look and feel. And that's also part of the spacing, the new spacing in that. Um, and one of my questions was going to be about whether you had any rules as far as like spacing goes, or like what gets italicized or so forth. But listening to you talk about your writing process, I have my own answers, just based on our conversation. It doesn't mean I necessarily understand completely, but I've begun to kind of understand like why things are doing what they're doing even more clearly. But maybe you could just speak a little bit about how you kind of both blew it up and then brought it back together, and like certain things snuck in different ways.
Yeah. I think I try to sketch the lines as if I am painting abstract expressionist style. I like to use feverish, restless brush strokes, and to go back to the idea of choreography. I'm trying to create a sort of composition on the page, and it is, again, it's improvised, and it's I'm looking, and I'm investigating, and maybe I try to figure out how to, when a line is whispered, for instance, or there's a voice with a different tonality, like how can I on the page give expression to that? But of course, it's a hit and miss maybe, and I think that's the layout. It's I like to see it as brush strokes, really. Like I went to art school a few years, and so I have a basic understanding of how you create a composition and how you can create depth, and so this knowledge is there. But when I paint, I like this on the cover of my chapbook. I never thought, okay, now I'm going to create this sort of hybrid being, or I just started. I just started painting some sort of being, whatever it was, and so this is also how I try to approach the layout of a poem. A few days ago, I wrote a poem which was very straightforward, almost like a little story, so that nothing too exotic or esoteric. So I guess it maybe it fits the content. The phonemic body is, I guess, a more mythopoetic piece, so that it requires a bit more of many voices coming together. While if you have like a more narrative poem, it's perhaps that's not necessary. To conclude, I'm constantly looking for ways to shape that.
Definitely, yeah. That never stops, right? That's just it's an ongoing process.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I was I came up with this idea because I like a lot of your 2-word ideas. And so I called them 2-word ideas in the questions I sent you. But I really do like ritual upholstery and lexical tentacles and unmasticated mindset are some examples I really like. And, I was thinking about, I looked up some of your paintings and drawings online.
Mhm.
And was just thinking about the medium and how it influences the composition. And you said you think about lines as kind of painterly lines.
Mhm.
And I was curious if you think at all about words as painterly pictures.
That's interesting. That's very interesting. Um, this question, which is your ninth question, I think it's a very deep question, and especially the last part of it. In what ways do sound, shape, texture, and space speak of humanity, of our world, and the universe? And that's a very deep question, and I want to thank you also for that, because this means you've explored, um, my work much deeper than I ever hoped for. And I'm not sure if my answer will do justice to the intelligence of this question. Um, but what I can say is that perhaps for some reason, I seem to want to include movement or motion into both my writing and my poem, my painting. I don't like static stuff. Um, and maybe movement expresses aliveness, vivacity. I don't know. Maybe I'm trying to create something that has a body, something, I don't know, something that is not dwelling solely in the mind. Um, and uh, you know, um, and then about the 2-word ideas, it struck me, and I was thinking like, oh yeah, that do I use 2-word ideas? And uh, I started observing myself when I received your questions, and I think that most probably I talk like this. I've caught myself often thinking in 2-word, and and not much of an answer, but somehow I think it's something that I need to keep on exploring. It's interesting. Yeah.
Definitely, yeah. Well, I'm glad that's something that you can explore.
Mm-hmm.
And while you were speaking, I was thinking about motion, as you were talking about motion specifically. You know, I was trying to decide whether when I imagine things, whether I ever imagine things that are stationary, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I was like, maybe, but rarely. I feel like when I imagine things, something's happening, right? Like there's movement of some sort. And I was wondering if maybe, this isn't really a question, but like if that's why, you know, we like things to happen, uh, whether it's in writing and painting and some other form of art, uh,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
or like how we just interact with other people. There's a movement in like that movement, as you talked about earlier, when you would speak to people in Dutch and they'd reply in English, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
maybe they're seeing some sort of motion that, is indicative of the fact that you speak English. Uh,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's
I don't know.
possible. Yeah. That's an interesting thing. I wonder, listening to you, I wonder if it's a universal thing, or maybe, in the Occident, in the West, we're all addicted to speed.
Yeah.
And so, we cannot tolerate things not moving. Or maybe, maybe it's a natural thing that, like, when I was doing my MFA and I was trying to write a novel, there, I try to include, cars racing,
Yeah.
or like people meeting while walking really fast, or to create movement.
Right.
So I don't know, maybe it's something, but definitely for my painting, and I have to say, I did art school. I was in high school, actually, my 2 last years of high school, and I was very bad at it. Like I almost failed to get my high school. Yeah, but because they wanted us to draw still lifes, and like a orange,
Right.
like studying an orange for 3 months, and when I started reading about the Impressionists and Van Gogh, and I think particularly Van Gogh, yeah, like he painted so feverishly, like there's so much fire in his paintings. And then later, when I started reading about the Koning and the abstract expressionists and their ideas about the performance, painting as performance. And then I think that influenced me. And I cannot, like, if I have to think, okay, these are the dimensions, and but if I can do it fast, like that, then something emerges, and then and that's what I can do. It has to have, I think it has to have motion, otherwise I just bored, I think. I don't have patience maybe to devote 3 months of my life to an orange.
Yeah, that is an interesting idea, and devoting 3 months to an orange, that is.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So let's end on this last question I have here. Sometimes your lines are straightforward, and at other times they're highly technical or difficult. If someone doesn't possess a certain knowledge or familiarity with something, or a willingness to look up some information. And so I was just wondering how you navigate the space between imagination, reality, and desire.
Again, a very deep question, but I mean, it's also legitimate. I think I've met readers and writers of poetry who feel it's pretentious to use vocabulary that's, let's say, technical or belongs to the jargon of a certain scientific discipline. But again, I go to Will Alexander's work in my attempt to explore this question. I mean, Will uses tons of unusual words, phrasings, and so on. So when I first began reading his work, I often had to think like how sacred texts or they are often written in a dense and difficult linguistic register, or sometimes in a dead language, like Latin, when Mass was still in Latin, or I think the Latin gave it extra cachet. A Mass in Latin is very different than So and then the other religions have classical Arabic and Persian, and then maybe another important aspect, I think, and I also have that from my conversations with Will, is to create sort of sonic escape hatches. So by using these words, you can you can avoid the pitfall of the quotidian. So if you look at the Annunciation of the Phonemic Body, it would be very weird if it was written in prosaic language. It's somehow the sort of cosmic intelligence talking about how humanity's future may look rather robotic, maybe, or transhumanist. It calls for a sort of, I don't know, esoteric sort of language or an attempt to that. So, maybe some people will lose their interest, or maybe others will become more curious. I don't know. But I think as poets, maybe we have like a natural sensitivity to the palpability of words, their beauty, their mystery, and an occult sort of jargon can add to the enigmatic nature of a poem.
Oh yeah.
I think that's like the essence of my answer to this question.
Yeah, no, that's great. I I apologize for maybe asking like some enormous questions.
No, not at all. I was telling my husband, like, wow, I'm so impressed. These guys from the Midwest have really they've really dug deep into my poetry. It's a compliment. It's just, I love it. And these sort of questions, I think they should be asked, and they're challenging, and I like that. I really like that, Matthew. I would be very disappointed if you would ask me, I don't know, like very mundane sort of questions. I mean, that's what's poetry for, I think. And maybe that's, and I'll stop after this. Maybe that's also why it's losing popularity with the larger segment of the population, because it's not like, you cannot go to a drive-through burger joint and consume your poem, or at least not something that is timeless. It took me years to understand the poetry of somebody like William Blake. I felt attracted at a very early age to his poetry, but I thought, hey, what is that? So I can imagine there are not a lot of people who feel drawn to that. So I'm very happy with your questions. To use a very a quotidian word.
Yeah. Well, great. Well, thank you so much
Thank you
for joining me today. And if you haven't yet, right, get Georgia's book on Trainwreck Press, Inside the Black Hornet's Mind Tunnel. Thank you again.
Thank you, Matthew.
Yep.
Bye. Thank you so much.